A federal appeals court has revived a lawsuit challenging the COVID-19 vaccine mandate imposed by the LA school district, noting that the record doesn't clearly show whether the vaccines prevent transmission of the illness. Leslie Manukian is president and founder of Health Freedom Defense Fund. Joining me now with more. Leslie, thanks for joining me.
So great to be with you, Stacey. Thanks for having me, especially to discuss something that's so important.
I know I'm right there with you because we're talking about children here. And this is actually a surprising development to me. It means that the truth is finally settling in after 3.5 years of nothing but propaganda.
Very much so. There's been a blunt force applied to all of us under the Supreme Court case called Jacobson versus Massachusetts that was decided in 1905. That's been used to justify literally bludgeoning Americans, threatening them with the loss of their jobs, inability to go to school and things like this if they don't submit to this experimental shot. And Jacobson was just decided in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that it didn't apply to this case. And this is monumental.
It's monumental also because the COVID-19 shot has been added to the vaccine schedule for children. So a lot of American children are being given this shot as a matter of routine when children aren't even the primary targets of this virus. They actually recover from it quite well without any, shot intervention. It's like a mild flu for them, unless they have severe comorbidities. But even in that case, the vaccine lacks effectiveness. We have no proof that lives were saved by this shot during the pandemic. And I think that's what we need to have on the morning, evening, and nightly news. Leslie, we need truth here.
Yeah, and that's exactly what this case is about. So we filed against the Los Angeles Unified School District against their mandate for employees. But here's what happened is that the Ninth Circuit just issued its opinion or its ruling stating that our case had been dismissed wrongly, reversing the lower court because the lower court misapplied Jacobson. Jacobson has been used to justify mandates of children and adults for the last 4 years of this shot. But what the court ruled is that the shot does not stop transmission or infection, and therefore it must be considered a medical intervention, a medical treatment, which must be voluntary. So this is really a big shift. And what it lays bare is that the state doesn't have an interest in just telling you, just because the state or the CDC says something is a vaccine doesn't mean it is, and doesn't mean that you can be forced to take it.
So can we just admit that something that's going on here is actually, and it's key to the discussion, that Americans don't have the right under the COVID-19 protocols that we were subjected to. Americans no longer have the right to say, I decline, or my child is still coming to school, but I'm not going to have them take the shot.
Well, what's been going on for the last several years, Stacey, is that this has been going on for about 10 years. So I made an award-winning documentary on vaccines called The Greater Good. And for the last 10 years, more and more parents have been saying, hey, wait a second, maybe I want to slow down. I don't want to do as many, or I want to pick and choose. I mean, when I grew up in an era when everybody got chickenpox and that was deemed a kind of a fun thing, my siblings and I flew on an airplane with chickenpox. And today you're told you have to be isolated. So parents are waking up that maybe it's not so good to actually get rid of all these things. Some of these infectious diseases actually protect us against autoimmune disease, inflammatory conditions, and even cancer. We know this already. And so people are wanting to pick and choose. But what's been happening is there's just been this blanket power that's been given to the state kind of on faith. And what the Ninth Circuit said was, you know what, just because CDC says something, we're not going to take it at face. And CDC, let's remember, changed the definition of vaccination and immunity in the beginning of COVID in order to facilitate mandating of these shots, which don't stop transmission or infection. So what's really big here is that the court has narrowed the application of Jacobson for the first time in history. And ultimately, what we want to get to is a place, I run Health Freedom Defense Fund, and our objective is to change the cultural norm so that we all respect individuals' bodily autonomy and also codify that in law. This win is the first step in that process, in our view. It really, it's the first chink in the armor of Jacobson, which is what's been used to justify all these mandates. And Every child is different. No government official or a bureaucrat or state official knows what is best for your child. Only you do. And that power should be in the hands of the parents, not in the state.
Yeah, and I just would add, we should have parents who don't, if they don't want their children vaccinated, because now there's actually people who are alleging, and I don't find anything wrong with their allegation that children who are unvaccinated are healthier. So in order for us to figure out if that's true, children should be allowed under the supervision of their parents to be unvaccinated. Now, I know that might sound radical to people who are into compliance, and I'm like you. I'm from the last century, the 1900s. There was no question about whether or not I would be vaccinated. My dad was in the military, so I got my shots at my annual checkups on base at the doctor at the on base hospital. And as I got older and I met people who came from the United States, I had no unvaccinated friends. I had no one that I knew in my world who hadn't gotten every single shot. And I continued that action. I went into the military myself, and every time the flu shot was given, we lined up in our office. They would come to the office and they would give us the flu shot. They'd have 2 days. And if you missed it, you were expected to go get the shot and then let your supervisor know that you had, I wasn't here on so and so, but I got the shot, and they would just check it off their list. 100% compliance. No one would say, I'm not taking the flu shot. They would just tell us what to do, and we did it. Now we have this has changed the paradigm. Candace Owens did an in-depth series on the effect of vaccinations on babies and children, and she has chosen not to vaccinate any of her 3 children. And so many millions of others are following her and walking in her footsteps, making decisions about whether or not they want this vaccine. So basically, a la carte. And I think that's great. And so, Leslie, you talked about the ruling. They literally said the vaccine doesn't present the spread of COVID-19, and because of this, Jacobson does not apply. Is this the first step to actually getting rid of Jacobson as accepted case law?
I think so. There has been there's been a slate of uh, cases decided at the Supreme Court decided in the last 50 years or so. Griswold versus Connecticut, and then it was called Washington versus Glucksberg, and another one, Cruzon versus Director. All of these cases have found that we have a zone of privacy around ourselves that into which the state cannot intrude. But more importantly, the Supreme Court has ruled in these cases that you have a right to refuse unwanted medical treatment, even if it might save your life. Now, that is at odds with Jacobson. And so what needs to happen is that Jacobson needs to be reconciled with the more recent jurisprudence from the Supreme Court. And this is the first step in that direction. Ultimately, Jacobson needs to be overturned. Let's look back to this, Stacey. Jacobson was decided in 1905. I couldn't vote, and nor could you. And you know what? Jim Crow laws were still in place, right? This is
Yeah.
an era. Who wants to go back to this? They were sterilizing women that they deemed to be too unintelligent to have children. Jacobson must be consigned to the dustbin of history where it belongs. And this, I believe, is the first step. It's opening the door for that to happen.
Wow. So doesn't that give us some context? That's over 100 years ago. It's 120 some odd years ago. And we're just still using that as case law. If we're scientific pursuits, it would be different if this was, case law about residences or something. But what do we have in this country that has existed that long in the way of medicine, right? Accepted practice in medicine. Pretty much everything has changed since the early 1900s in the way that doctors treat patients, even surgeries. I mean, everything's different now. It's such a great point. So they're actually looking for a correct legal standard here, and they're hoping that they can find a way forward for us as Americans. I really want to see what you have literally spoken into existence there, Leslie. I want to see that happen. We should remand this to the dustbin of history. It's wonderful to have you here today. Tell us the website that people can find out more.
Yeah, so we're at healthfreedomdefense.org. And let me just say, we're the organization that defeated the federal travel mask mandate. We have a strong history now of success. We have many other cases. We just defeated Disney in another lawsuit, but you can find us at healthfreedomdefense.org.
All right, Leslie Manukian, thank you so much for your time today. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you, Stacey.
All right. And up next, I'll be talking about comedian Rob Schneider. He's slamming Will Smith, who's been out of the public eye for a while. We'll be back with all of that and more here on Stacey Washington Now on Salem News Channel.